Okay, we're back. We're on side 2 here, and we were just talking about the beam ships and the comfortable shape of the flying saucer that they were using. Later on in 1981, Billy's going to take some pictures of another ship that's an experimental craft that looks quite different, and over the years has proved to be uncomfortable to people. It's been challenged more than any other picture, so perhaps they were right. A couple of the things I might want to mention about the beam ship that came up here was this, what they call the safety or security thing, that again they reiterated, and maybe they're dropping some clues here, that the light emitting device that they use for the slower drives is used within a range of 153 million kilometers of a solar system. They were commenting that this was important because they had already learned that if they try to accelerate into these with these tachyon drives or these faster than light travel propulsion systems, if they're closer to a solar system than 153 million kilometers, that quite often it can disturb the orbit of the solar system. Quite often it can throw comets out of their orbit or cause, asteroids and things to go a different direction. So it can be a destabilizing factor to the natural orbit of, bodies moving in a solar system. So they've learned to never accelerate or make these hyperspace jumps closer than 153 million kilometers to a solar system. It took her 7 hours to get to the Pleiades where she lived, because it takes them over 3 hours to fly out of our solar system at the slower speeds. And once they get past this security area, they call this 153 million kilometers, they then accelerate the ship. The energy screens around the ship protect it from the mass-speed correlation so it's not crushed. Once the ship attains speeds at the speed of light or beyond at some point, the tremendous pressures of the mass-speed correlation of space pressing in on the ship are used to facilitate some sort of compression method where the ship is actually converted to another form. She says it's something like a thought form into particles that exist beyond the speed of light. These particles are then programmed for the destination that they need to go. They then reappear at that destination. Say, for instance, they're going to the Pleiades. They go to the Pleiadian area. The ship then is transferred back into its material form, and then it slows down and flies for 3 hours into the Pleiades. The actual time that the jump, or the in null time, I says, is just a part second. That actually there is some time transpires, but it's very short indeed. So for the most part, the entire 7 hours is spent speeding up out of the solar system and slowing down, flying into the other solar system. Now, on many occasions, Semjase had to come all the way from the Pleiades, but as the contacts continued, on many cases she stayed on Earth for quite a period of time, living at one of their underground facilities in the Switzerland area. They had one there, one in Russia, and they did build one in the southwestern part of the United States. And on sometimes she would stay on board some of their very large ships, which they call great spacers. We call them motherships sometimes. But on some occasions she did have to fly all the way from the Pleiades, and she regarded that as a very long trip. That's something very different for us, to take 7 hours to go 450 light years and think of that as a long trip. I suppose that's like if you got in your car in Los Angeles and drove to Colorado Springs or Chicago or something. You would think that was a very long, grueling trip, so they probably regard that as much the same. By the way, in your accompanying book that comes with this audio tape set, Exhibit 1, there's a little drawing you can refer to at this point, and it has a little diagram there of the beam ship breaking into hyperspace and flying over to the planet Earth. So you might want to refer to that. On the fifth contact, which was Sunday, February 16th, 1975, just one day later, there was another contact. And in this particular contact, it was brought out, something kind of interesting here. Billy's writing a book, and at this point they don't tell us what the book is about in the notes. He's writing a book about something, and they're very excited to see that he's writing the book because it contains some truthful knowledge that's been transmitted to him from some higher life form which they've arranged, and they're very excited to see this information get out into the public area. They are, it says in the notes, a little concerned because they think Billy's too anxious to publish it and it's coming out too soon, but they remark that they're going to leave that up to him, that it's his decision on what he does with the information from the contacts. So it's almost as if they're just kind of like, regarding this a little bit as a test. that they would feed him information, teach him things, and he's going to do books and lectures, and they're going to prompt him to go out into public, but these decisions are really up to him all the way through. It was on this contact that Semjase began to explain to Billy a little bit about our own history. It seems that in our own education, or these things that they wanted to make clear to the planet Earth, they wanted us to start understanding about our origin, where we came from, and how we really fit into the family of man. And I suppose most importantly, that we're not alone, that we really do have some ancestry. The story I'm about to tell you, which is the beginning of the history that they related to Billy several times, gives us some real insight to where we came from, or of course where many of us on this planet come from, and about the terrible history that has gone before us and that we're possibly about to repeat. So let me tell you just a little bit about what happened on that contact. To begin with, one of the first things historically they mentioned, because Billy had asked about it, was the Great Flood. Now, in our current history, our current Christian historians date the Great Flood at 10,079 years back from that date. All the dates they gave Billy were from the day that they were talking. And so since he was talking in 1975, they placed it at that number of years. But they cited that that was not the exact number of years. And at that time, though, they didn't tell him how far back it really was. They just mentioned that in many cases, some of our history is far off. And I believe that the Great Flood is off about 1,000 years. But it isn't until later on in the contact notes where they explain it again, and we'll go back over it at that point. One of the interesting parts about the Great Flood was what caused it. The Pleiadians are telling us that there exists something they call a destroyer comet, a very large comet that passes through our system. And back at that time period, the Earth had a rotation, not of 24 hours, but something greater than 40 hours. And we rotated in a little differently. The sun did not come up on the east as it does today. So the Earth was a little different than we realize it right now. And that the comet itself had passed by Earth and caused the Great Flood. So at that time there was great destruction. As a matter of fact, this comet's going to come again in the year 2275. They say this great destroyer comet that caused the Great Flood comes by roughly over 575 and a half years. And it came by in 1680, 295 years ago. So we're going to get it back in the year 2275. It's going to come around one more time. It was the cause of the Great Flood when it came by. And that's what happened then. There was large amounts of water flooded over many mountainous areas, and then it changed. On two other occasions the comet has come by, and that's what's caused the major change in our planet, why we do no longer have a day that's more than 40 hours. The planet has been slowed down to 24-hour day revolution, and that's because of that comet, and it's even changed the position of the planet so the sun rises now in the east. 3,453 years back, this destroyer comet came very close to Earth again, but something really kind of fantastic happened. When it came by on that particular occasion, it was pulling in tow with it a very large other planet. Actually, the planet was about the same size as Earth, but most of the debris that the comet would pull would be smaller particles. But it had entrapped, some previous time, about 130 years before that, it had entrapped another planet and was pulling it. This is how large this comet is. It's so big it's actually pulling another planet alongside with it. Well, this other planet that's getting pulled along comes very close to Earth because the comet comes very close to Earth. Now again, this is 3,453 years back. And when it comes by, there's a major loss of life on Earth. The comet comes very close. There's a lot of loss of